Good morning. My name is Barbara Fuller, and as chair of the board, I welcome you to this November 15th, 2022 working session of the Washtenaw County Board of Road Commissioners. Aaron Smith will now describe how our meetings operate, how to access the agenda, and how you can participate remotely.
Thanks, Commissioner Fuller. There are multiple ways to make public comment during today's meeting, whether you're joining us in person or virtually. If you are here in person and would like to make public comment, please fill out the sign-in sheet now. If you're joining us virtually, we will ask you to virtually raise your hand at the appropriate time in the agenda. If you're joining us virtually, the chat feature on the Zoom meeting is available only as technical support for users on their computer or smartphone. If you're experiencing technical issues with audio or video during the meeting, submit a comment in the chat feature and I will help you troubleshoot. If you are a staff member experiencing issues, please contact the IT help desk for assistance. The audio and video of this meeting is being recorded. A link to the video recording will be posted to wcroads.org in the coming days. There are printed copies of today's working session agenda on the table here and is also posted on our website. There is a link available in the chat if you're joining us from your computer or smartphone. And I'll turn it over to Chair Barb Fuller.
Thank you, Aaron. At this point, I will officially call this meeting to order and would ask Aaron to call the roll.
Chair Barb Fuller.
Present.
Vice Chair Rod Green.
Present.
Commissioner Douglas Fuller has an excused absence today. So Commissioner Gloria Yamas.
Present.
Commissioner Joanne McCollum.
Present.
And the following directors are in attendance. Managing Director Cheryl Siddle, Director of Engineering and County Highway Engineer Matt Washtenaw, Director of Operations Adam Lape, and Director of Finance and IT Dan Ackerman.
Thank you, Aaron. The next item on our agenda is public participation. This is the time set aside on the agenda to receive comments from the public. This is not intended to be a period for dialogue. Each person will be allotted 3 minutes to address the board, and Aaron will explain how you may be recognized to offer comments to the board. Aaron?
Since this is a hybrid meeting with both in-person and virtual attendees, we will take turns between those attending in person and virtual. For virtual attendees, we ask that you virtually raise your hand now. If you're viewing the meeting on your computer, first make sure to click Join Audio. You can then raise your hand by clicking the Participants or Reactions button at the bottom of your screen and then the Raise Hand button. If you dialed into the meeting from your touch-tone phone, raise your hand by dialing *9. I will unmute virtual participants with raised hands one at a time. I will announce your username or last 4 digits of your phone number when it is your turn to speak. Please share your name and address before beginning your comments. So for in-person attendees, we will start with those who have signed up on the sign-in sheet as you walked in. If you didn't sign in, you are still welcome to make comment. I'll notify you when it is your turn. Each speaker will have 3 minutes to share their comments with the board. At this time, Commissioner Barb Fuller, we have no one with a raised hand.
Thank you. And I don't believe we have any public members present in the chamber. Thank you very much.
Yep.
So at this point, I will turn the meeting over to Cheryl Siddle, our Managing Director.
Sure. Thank you. Good morning. This is the time of year where we review the current year's budget. So in this case, year end for fiscal year 2022, and also set our preliminary budget for 2023. Obviously as a working session topic with the intent that we would bring this back to the board for action in December. With that, I'll be happy to hand it over to Dan Ackerman. Since we've been spending a lot of time going through things, this really was a collaborative effort, but obviously a huge undertaking by Dan himself. A bit of herding cats.
Right. Dan Ackerman, Director of Finance and IT. Good morning.
Good morning.
And I can't believe we're here talking about year-end budgets, talking about 2023. I mean, seems like we just got through the last audit and the last year end and everything else, but always a topic that I enjoy talking about. A little disappointed to see, I don't know if the public is interested in the budget. Obviously, you know, projects and things, we seem to get a lot of participation. You know, maybe that's a vote of confidence, or you know, people don't like talking about numbers. I don't know. I could talk about numbers all day, of course, but
I'm going to take it as a compliment and an indication of trust by our
maybe, right.
residents of Washtenaw.
There you go. Yes. So this working session on the budget is for all of you, the commissioners. Certainly, I encourage you to ask any questions at any time. It's definitely not an interruption, and I feel like it's my goal to either provide answers for you, or if I can't, you know, do some homework and get back with you. And I do want to stress that these are preliminary numbers. The final numbers may change. I was looking at where this meeting fell in the calendar and everything, and it was very ambitious to try to get everything compiled and ready for this meeting. So you might see some changes. I always like to close the books through October. So I have good numbers through October, and then we project November and December numbers. Unfortunately, there were a few delays and things, so I was not able to completely close the books. So that could change the numbers slightly, but not significantly. So I'll just put that out there for you. And certainly we would communicate from today to when we actually provide the budget for approval at the public hearing. We would communicate any significant changes from what you're seeing today to what we provide to you in December. So any questions at all, or should we go ahead and get right into it?
Plunge ahead.
Okay. Okay, Emily, if you can go to the next slide, please. Or is it Aaron? Sorry, is it? Oh, you're okay. I just want to make sure you're running, Emily.
I
Okay,
feel like we have E1 and E2.
E1.
Yes, and E3 is currently answering the phones.
That's right, Emma. Thing one and thing
EK,
two, now we
no.
have thing three.
Oh, okay. All right, so we're going to start out with the 2022 year-end budget. So again, we try and have good numbers through October, and then we estimate November and December. You can go to the next slide, please. So just talking a little bit about the entire year of 2022, supply chain issues. You know, I used to think it was a lot when it took, you know, 6 to 12 months for a heavy truck to be built, and now was it 24 months now or more? So obviously that's really had a major impact on this agency as far as, you know, we are trying to get 4 new trucks a year, but it's taking so long with the supply chain delays that, you know, you'll see next year we have a big capital investment in heavy equipment. And again, hopefully we'll receive all those. We're not even sure if we'll receive all of them in 2023, all the heavy trucks. So it's required a lot more planning on staff's part, you know, so if we used to get something in a couple weeks and now it's taking a couple months, we are having to, you know, do a lot more to plan ahead. So, you know, it just, and if it's received in 2022 or 2023, that adversely impacts, or that could have an impact on the budget too, of course. So, you know, staff is doing the best we can with the information we have now. We're hopeful 2023, maybe things will get a little better. But at this point in time, I'm not real sure. So that is certainly something we're having to deal with. Inflationary costs. Obviously, we've heard a lot about inflation and the impacts on things. You know, gas prices certainly rose tremendously in 2022. They've come down a little, but they seem to continue to fluctuate. And obviously, we're big consumers of fuel. So, and also, what impact will that have on Michigan transportation funds if people are driving less? You know, it doesn't seem to have impacted things too terribly much in 2022, as you've seen the monthly Michigan transportation funds. But who knows if that's prolonged or gets worse. So certainly that's something that we, you know, definitely had an impact. And as I say in this slide, despite these challenges, we were able to complete a vast majority of our projects, very ambitious construction year. We did have some carryover of primarily non-motorized projects, and we'll talk about that in a minute. But a majority of the other projects, we were able to, you know, significantly complete and get those open to the public, get the roads open to the public. So, you know, definitely kudos to engineering and operations on those huge accomplishments. And as I mentioned, we had to delay $3.3 million of heavy road or heavy truck purchases. And then there was some other equipment as well. Again, just, you know, it can't be delivered as timely as it was. So, but we want to make sure if we budget for it in a certain year that we're carrying it over to the next. So that doesn't go into the budget for next year as far as the road equipment purchases. And so obviously we try and do as good a job as we can. And for 2023, the same thing. If it looks like we may not receive some of these heavy trucks in 2023, again, we'll want to make sure we carry over that budget because it was projected for a certain thing. So we just don't want to tap into the next year.
Any
So,
questions on?
I
Go
do
ahead,
have-
Commissioner Yamas.
So I know that we talked about this a little bit before.
mhm.
We have commitments on what a vehicle is gonna cost us, right? But how long is that commitment? 6 months? So.
Do you know about how long, Adam? I mean, I imagine once you get into an agreement, it's, even if it takes a year or two, there's a commitment there. So is that correct, Adam?
Yes, Adam Leib, Director of Operations. Yeah, so the heavy equipment for Caterpillar, they've guaranteed us a year. So when they write the quote for a piece of equipment, say a road grader or a backhoe, that'll last for a year. They've at least guaranteed us that. Truck pricing should be the same once we enter into that. Agreement, but purchase agreement. That should be locked in because that's what we're gonna purchase the vehicle.
Okay. That was my question, how that would
Yeah.
impact our budget if they don't come in within a year's time and what's the average delay so far,
In months per get the vehicle. So the 11 that we've had to carry over, they were actually purchased in 2021. Now, some of the pandemic affected that. So we haven't really recognized the actual carryover delay that we're going to see now routinely at this point. That will be something we'll see probably next year. Because we're still working through a little bit of things we've seen from the pandemic. So that could fluctuate a bit.
Yeah, and as you'll see when we get to the 2023 budget, we're doing a worst case scenario. We're assuming we'll take delivery of everything that we've ordered to date, plus any new equipment that we would be ordering. We're assuming we would take delivery of it in 23. So that's sort of worst case scenario as far as being prepared to pay for that equipment should it arrive. We know that, we're still trying to figure out what our new normal is going to be with respect to delivery times. And certainly, as Dan indicated, if we need to carry then anything over into 2024 because we didn't receive it in 23, we're prepared to do that.
Thank you.
So are those commitments 12 months from date of signing then?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay,
That is correct.
okay. I'm sorry, Commissioner Green.
No, it's fine. Dan, the commitment to 4 new vehicles a year, is that pretty inflexible or, do you see any variation at all in that commitment?
That was just something that staff, along with the commissioners, decided made sense. Certainly we don't have the capacity to buy all new trucks, all say 30, 40, whatever trucks. So we, as a staff, decided to try to replace 4 a year, and eventually our fleet, and it has improved significantly, but eventually our fleet would get to a point where it's acceptable. So Cheryl, did you want to add? anything?
Absolutely. What we've been trying to do, Commissioner Green, is get into a replacement cycle that makes sense with respect to either the number of miles or the number of hours on a piece of equipment, so that we are staying on top of it. It keeps our, repair costs down. It keeps our equipment on the road as best as possible. Once you get to any of us that have driven older vehicles knows what it's like, where you're hoping it's going to start and you're hoping it's going to stay operational, which is not particularly how you want to run equipment in the middle of a snowstorm. So really that 4 trucks per year is trying to balance our budget against also trying to have a replacement schedule for equipment that makes sense for our organization. We have about 50 trucks, 52-ish. So we'd like to, if possible, 4 to 5, so that we're about every 10 years replacing each truck. That ideally would be the 8 to 10 years would be the equipment replacement schedule that we would be on.
I think we're trying to mirror an asset management plan.
As much as
right?
possible.
So we're doing that in IT. We try to do that with our fleet. We try to do it with roads as much as we can.
Exactly.
Yep. It's all about the competing interests, roads and our capital purchases, and trying to find some delicate balance as best we can with the fiscal constraints that we might have.
And just to be clear, the delay of the purchases is a reflection of delivery, not that we have budget issues internally.
Yes. Yep,
to
exactly.
be clear.
Yep, and as Cheryl alluded to, conservatively, if there's any possibility that we will receive any of this equipment, say in 2022, we include in the budget, knowing full well we'd probably carry it over. But you'd rather budget for it and not receive it and carry it over, as opposed to you carry over the funds and now, whoops, well, they were actually able to get it to us earlier, and now that kind of blows your budget. So so when we meet, we always have those discussions. And I say, Adam, you know, if there's any chance at all that we'll receive this, he's, well, probably not likely. Well, if there's a slim chance, then we want to include it in the budget and then just carry it over if we don't receive it, say in this year.
And by carryover, you mean we protect
Carry the
those
funds
funds
over, right?
so that when the bill comes, whenever it comes, we're prepared to pay it.
Exactly.
Okay.
Yep. Mhm. Okay. Well, great questions. Any other, or should we go to the next slide?
Let's go.
Okay. Next slide, please. So we're looking like we need to increase our deficit spending by about $3 million. And so that would, overall, we would have deficit spending of about 6.6 million, which will leave us with a fund balance of about $15 million, which is 18% of expenditures. If you recall, Plant Moran kind of gave us some targets of 15% being the low and 25% being the high. Of course, someone in my position would rather it be closer to 25%, but there's also a lot of things that we want to accomplish as an agency. We've already talked about road equipment. We want to put every dollar that we can justify into the roads. And of course, we have commitments to employees and retirees. So recognizing all that, you know, I guess the 18% of expenditures doesn't make me pause or make me too nervous. I also feel that the fund balance that we're showing, or the deficit spending, is more of a worst case scenario, and I fully expect our numbers to be better, come in better than we're budgeting, which is by design, not significantly, but you know, our Michigan Transportation Funds, where we have that budgeted for 2022, I fully expect to receive a little bit more. Hopefully, you know, hopefully not a lot more, but hopefully it's you know, a couple 100,000 more, which seems like a lot, but out of, you know, 33 million, 34 million, it's a small percentage of that. So again, you know, we run a conservative budget where we try to underestimate our revenues, again, not significantly, but and overestimate your expenditures, so your bottom line should improve. You know, once all the numbers come in and we're audited and all that. You know, for instance, winter, who knows what winter will be like? I think it might be snowing now. I don't know.
It was when I came in.
Yes. So obviously we never know what Mother Nature will do, but we try to budget for close to a worst case scenario as far as winter is concerned. And, you know, we're at the mercy of Mother Nature. So if Mother Nature is kind to us the last couple months of the year and you know, January through March of next year, then obviously there will be even more capacity potentially. So, but that's kind of been our approach to budgeting, and I think it's been pretty successful. And you'd rather in that first quarter, next year, the budget discussions say, okay, our final numbers came in a little bit better. You know, maybe we got out of winter fairly well, and there are things that currently we have like an unfunded list going. Maybe we can start adding some things back. So any questions on this slide at
We'll
all?
be looking at that, excuse me, in the second quarter then.
In the first quarter, we'll know what our year-end 2022 numbers are, and we'll know how we came out of winter, assuming winter doesn't go into April or May. Hopefully not, but yeah, so those two factors then allow us to look at, you know, what other things can we do hopefully in 2023.
Normally that would be April.
Okay.
Any other questions on this slide? Okay, Emily, if we can go to the next one. Revenues, Michigan Transportation Funds, as we share with you, they tend to fluctuate. Overall, we're slightly ahead of where we have budgeted. No idea what the next few months will do, but we do feel, you know, keeping our budget for the Michigan Transportation Funds where they are is a good spot to land. You know, we like to maybe increase that a little bit, but you know, we're certainly hopeful that the last 3 months that it'll come in a little bit higher. And again, so that's a conservative approach, right? We're expecting a little bit less of Michigan Transportation Funds than we actually receive. It's anyone's guess, of course, what we will actually receive. But of course, we take the estimates from the state of Michigan, and we use the history that we have here to try and project where we think the Michigan Transportation Funds will land. So we shall see. And as far as federal and state aid projects, we're decreasing that by about $3.5 million because there are some project carryovers, as I mentioned. Some of the big ones are the Huron River Drive Border to Border Trail Phase D3. What is the D, by the way? Okay, it's a segment. I never knew that. So yeah.
Can we say that in the microphone?
Oh, so D3 is I guess it's a segment. And you said it's from what to what? Zeeb to Delhi. So we're obviously just continuing that border to border trail. And we had anticipated more work being accomplished on that in 2022. But that's being carried over into 2023. The other project is the Platte Road Greenway. So again, another non-motorized trail. And that one, we had budgeted more work in 2022. Again, it wasn't accomplished. And were there just various delays or? Okay, so various delays experienced with those projects. And so we want to make sure we carry that over into next year's budget. So there's also a corresponding decrease in expenditures. So really it's almost like a pass through between the federal aid and then the partners we have. The Parks Commission is contributing a portion. Any local costs they're contributing or they're paying for that. And then I believe it's Pittsfield Township for Platte Road is reimbursing us as well. So those are almost pass-throughs and minimal impacts on the budget. But we want to make sure, again, we're carrying things over appropriately.
Go ahead, Commissioner Green.
Thank you. With the anticipated increase in electric vehicles, is there likely to be a corresponding decrease in MTF funds?
So we've looked at projections and we'll talk about that when we get to 2023.
Okay.
But it is estimated that Michigan Transportation Funds will continue to increase. They added an inflationary factor for the gas tax.
Okay.
And I'll talk about that in a minute. So they added an inflationary, so that means more money at the pump. And they have revenue from the marijuana tax, I guess. That also, I guess, apparently helps us a little bit. I forgot the number. Do you remember that? Was it like 300 million or?
It's about 1%.
Okay.
Mhm.
Yeah. So, but the projections that we received from the state of Michigan, and they look at it about quarterly, does show it increasing. So, obviously electric vehicles are becoming more prevalent, and I think those conversations need to take place, and they kind of are, but I've not heard of any solutions yet as far as a different funding mechanism. But at least in the short term, I don't see that impacting this agency adversely.
Commissioner McCollum.
Yes, how does the Michigan Transportation Funds, how are they determined? And how much is it across the board? Is it the same for every road commission, or do they look at that specific needs of that road commission?
Well, I think it's based on size, of course, right?
Correct. It is a formula that is written into the law. So it is balancing the number of road miles that you have. There's differentiation between primary and local. You get a different amount of money depending on whether it's got that primary designation or the local designation. Population plays a factor into it. It's a very complicated formula, but road commissions or county road agencies receive 39% of MTF. The state of Michigan, MDOT gets 39%, and then cities and villages get the remaining 22%. But how the actual formula itself, I think that's a PhD level course for any of us to try to understand. But it has not changed. It has changed over time, but it has not at all changed recently. And again, it's a very sophisticated formula, really trying to balance urban versus rural. All the same conversations that take place for us as a county take place at the state level as well.
Thank you.
And if you'd like, the state of Michigan does provide some spreadsheets on what every county can expect to receive. So I could share that with you if you're interested.
I am.
And it's all relative, and I think it is kind of proportion to the size. So we're one of the larger road commissions, so we receive a larger percentage or a larger dollar amount. And then obviously Oakland County is the largest, and they receive probably 2 or 3 times more than we do. So some of it, definitely based on the size, you can see some correlations as far as what each road commission receives.
Thank you.
But I can share that if you'd like.
I appreciate it.
Yeah.
Thanks.
She was gonna say something.
Who's up? Cheryl?
If I may follow up on Commissioner Green's question about electric vehicles, it is absolutely a concern within the transportation industry and specifically in Michigan. CRA has done a white paper on it. They continue to work with MDOT and others. As Dan said, right now we have projections showing that the MTF based on registration fees and gas fuel taxes is stable, but I think that in the long run, absolutely, we're going to start to see some challenges with that with electric vehicles, even though they pay a higher registration fee, it is not being offset by the deduction in the fuel tax usage of the roadway. So there is going to have to be some long-term solution. There are discussions taking place. Other states have looked at models like vehicle miles traveled. As using that as a basis. So basically it's a user fee that's a little bit more proportional than the actual gas tax part of it. So there's some ideas that are out there, and it is something that we all need to be paying close attention to because it's our MTF is vital to our success. So we need to make sure that that is remaining in the forefront of our legislators, that this is not going to be a sustainable funding source for us.
Thank you.
And I'm sorry if I may add something else to that before we go to the next question. And if you recall, in 2017, there was a gas tax increase. Prior to that, we were receiving about 18 million in Michigan transportation funds. And now we're looking at, in the 30s, 33, 35 million. So certainly that helps us in the short term as well. But at some point there, you're going to reach a limit, right? And then it may be on the downswing or flat line, which we experienced that a lot of that in the 90s and 2000s. Where our Michigan transportation funds were flat or decreasing. We had the economic challenges of 2008, 2009, where people were driving less, and that meant we were receiving less. So, we had a lot of challenges then, and the electric vehicles and more prominence of electric vehicles could create that same scenario off in the future. But so far, at least in the next couple of years, projections are still showing it is ticking up a little bit, so.
Commissioner Yamas.
So do cities receive any MTF funds? They do not. for
They
their
do.
roads? They
Cities
do.
and villages receive, again, it's a formula, but they collectively receive 22% of MTF.
Oh, okay, I heard you say villages, so I didn't hear you. So the city and villages get 22%. Okay, thank you.
And that's all Act 50.
That's all in Act, it's spelled out in Act 51.
Of 1850.
1951, Act 51.
It seems like it's from the 1800s, yeah. Okay. Any other questions on this slide at all?
Good questions.
Yes, great questions. Okay, next slide, please. So as far as other contributions, again, we kind of talked about the Huron River Drive border to border projects, and the $2.3 million is a contribution from county parks. And so we will decrease that for 2022, and then we made sure to add it in 2023. Again, corresponding decrease in expenditures. So, it's primarily a wash again, as far as the budget's concerned. Next slide. As far as township contributions, if you recall, we start out with a traditional number in the second quarter. We were able to add, tremendously. Adam in the operations department have done a great job partnering with our townships. So we went from about a $3 million program to over a $6 million program. But when we look at all the numbers at this point in time, we have to kind of dial in a little bit. So we are showing decreasing that $6 million by about $430,000. A lot of times we find they're too efficient in the operations department, so the cost decrease, therefore the township's contribution would decrease as well. Sometimes projects don't end up moving forward, so we are recommending a slight decrease to that. And then as far as projects we're carrying over is another decrease of $1 million. That's primarily the Platte Road Greenway project. So the contributions from Pittsfield Township, we're just going to carry that into next year. And I believe there was a signal project as well that involved Pittsfield Township that we're carrying over into next year. Next slide. So expenditures, here's where you'll see the reduction in expenditures in the reimbursable road projects, primarily contractual services. That's all your carryover of all the projects that we discussed. You know, we talked about it from the revenue side. We also want to make sure we're reducing the expenses on the expenditure side too. Next slide. As far as our non-departmental department, I always think that's funny. We should maybe rename it, but it's a non-departmental department. We did receive a liability insurance refund, so we were able to reduce that a little bit. And as far as workers' compensation, great news on that front. We have a lower mod factor, and we've talked mod factors, but I'll just briefly explain. So mod factors is something that our provider, the County Road Association Self-Insurance Fund, or CRASIF, uses, that's a mouthful, uses to determine, they kind of benchmark all the road commissions. And so if you have a mod factor of 1, that means you have average workers' compensation claims and rates compared to the other road commissions. If you are over a mod factor of 1, then that means you're going to pay a premium because your experience is worse than the other road commissions. If you're under a mod factor of 1, which we are actually at 0.756, which is one of the lowest mod factors we have. You actually receive a discount then on what you pay for workers' compensation insurance. So the 0.756 gave us about an $80,000 credit for what we're paying for workers' compensation, which is almost half of what we pay in total. So, you know, kudos to all the things that we're doing. Our safety committee, our safety coordinators has already started to implement a lot of great things. You know, just really kind of trying to change a culture to have more of a focus on safety. What are my actions going to do? You know, what can I do to keep myself safe? And so obviously the main thing is with your mod factor below 1, that means your employees are safer and healthier and there's less claims. So that's the main thing, of course. But then obviously there's a financial impact too, and a positive one. So definitely great to, you know, was looking forward to sharing this news with the board, and we hope you know, that our mod factor can continue to be under a 1. And I know Craig's got a lot of great things. He's already done a lot of great things. He has a lot of great things in store. I went to a training that he gave last week on some basic safety concepts, and did a great job. Just good reminders. You always want to remind folks, you don't want them to get complacent with what they do, and we want everybody to come home safe. And the fact we're better than the average road commission, I think that shows we're doing a good job. Any questions on that at all? Yes.
Commissioner Yamas.
Just wanted to remind people, we received an award for our
Mhm.
odd factor this year.
Mhm.
So that was great.
Commissioner Green.
Just wondering, who sets that mod factor?
I imagine it's the board of of CRASIF.
Okay,
You know, based on all the claims and everything they receive, and I believe they change that annually. So they're on a July to June fiscal year. So around summertime, we'll know what our new mod factor is. But I think they just compile all the claims and costs and everything, and then they determine, you know, where that 1 or where that average is, and then obviously if you're above or below that number.
thank you.
Right, and they made the announcement in September, as Dan indicated, you know, they held, their fiscal year is, I think, July 1 to June 30th. Then they hold their annual meeting in September, and they announced who is on the honor roll, and we did receive an award for that. And also as a reward to our employees, we will be closing the office this coming Wednesday at 11. So everybody will have 4 hours of leave going into the Thanksgiving holiday weekend.
Yes.
Yes, I actually have a question about, on page 6 of the, annual budget report, 2022, where it says new projects include the Jackson Road congestion mitigation and air quality. And I was just curious, what was that about the air quality and CMAQ?
Oh, thanks, Matt.
I can help with that. Matt McDonnell, Director of Engineering. So we received a congestion mitigation air quality grant. It's a competitive grant that we go after for our signalized corridors. Often is the case because we can demonstrate by adding equipment and detection. In this case, we were ultimately looking at Jackson Road. Oftentimes, if there's an incident on I-94, people will get off, and we wanted to create a responsive system to accommodate that increase in flow of traffic. So we have an adaptive system that Brent and Elena can go into greater detail than I about what we've implemented, but essentially we added a part of our kits, who is our system-wide signal system that we operate through our traffic engineer software. We have an adaptive system, so we put more equipment out on the roadways. You'll see, we call them pucks, where there's orange puck-like drilled. There's a core, the pavement, insert a sensor, and then fill it with like an epoxy rubber, and it's orange. So that's what that is a sensor that is acknowledging either a vehicle going over or is over it, and then making a call to the signal saying, hey, I've got a big vehicle here. And you can put them at the stop bar, and then you can put them further back so that we can understand what queue, how many cars are stacked waiting for that signal to change. So based on all those things, we can add sensors into the pavement. We have the software in our traffic management system to do an analysis of, all right, here's what I'm seeing with demands, and I'm going to alter signal timing such that we can manage the flow. So that's what's going on Jackson Road corridor. Basically, it's from Baker all the way down to Zeeb. It may go a little further as well. So that was a signal project to mitigate air quality. So if you have congestion, meaning a lot of cars stacked up, you have exhaust and emissions that's concentrated. And that's really the goal of that funding source, is to eliminate that congestion so that you aren't having that concentrated emissions. So we are trying to get traffic to flow better. Therefore, we were scored very well, demonstrating that this project will result in cleaner air and a smoother system for managing traffic flow.
Wow. That sounds
These are competitive,
amazing.
these are competitive grants, so
Uh-huh.
our staff has done a really nice job of understanding what the criteria are and how to be successful on bringing these dollars into Washtenaw County.
Oftentimes, Dan reminded me, sometimes with our CMAQ projects, we're also able to write in and demonstrate in order to manage that software, we need laptops and equipment to do so. So we can also leverage that funding source to buy laptops oftentimes. So we get creative, and I give all the credit to Brent Schlack and Elena Yadikina, who really go after these and manage them from the design process, or from the grant writing to the design to implementing and construction all the way through. So our traffic and safety section has become very good and adept at identifying projects that will be highly competitive and will bring more money into our county.
Sounds very good. Thank you.
Two things. Is the intersection at Wagner and Jackson a smart light?
Yes,
So that's ours?
yes,
Correct.
Because I know when you get into the city of Ann Arbor, it's not very smart.
they have a different system. They have a differences and a different approach and
Different
philosophy
philosophy.
as well.
Yeah.
So,
And then in terms, I think, wasn't it CMAC money that improved the video conferencing capacity upstairs in our conference room?
yes, and that's really for like emergency
Yep,
management, where we are able to plug in to next door as well. We have the EOC, and we installed that direct fiber line where we're sharing the video feeds to the 911 dispatch and Huron Valley as well. So it's really a great cooperative example of a project.
it was a very creative application of that CMAC money.
Absolutely.
Well, it is, but if you think about it, if you have an incident and, and we're working very closely with emergency response, usually that incident has a traffic implication. So what we want to do is
Yes.
clear that as fast as we can, not only for the safety of those involved, but also so that we can get, traffic flowing again, which gets to reducing those emissions like Matt just described. So there is absolutely a direct link between all of that, but this is where our staff has gotten very creative and able to, again, continue to leverage those dollars and bring them in to Washtenaw County so that we have as a smooth a system and as an adaptable of a system as possible.
And so you'll see that funding source in the budget whenever you see that CMAC. That's really what it's going towards. A lot of times the signal equipment upgrades and anything with IT, as you know, after 3-4 years, you got to go back and refresh and make sure that a lot of it is a lot about communicating between signals, communicating back to our office here and into our network. So that IT component is always we're always having to upgrade. So it's
And-
continuous.
My compliments to the organization, staff as a whole, the foresight that has been demonstrated in terms of getting ahead of the wave on all of this infrastructure for us has really paid off. We didn't know the pandemic was coming, but when it did, we were ahead of the game big time. And it's a tribute to the staff looking down, sorry for the pun, down the road and around the corner to make sure we were ready. And we have been. Remind me on our website where the link is to the grant dollars that staff manages to bring in annually.
We can send that out to the commissioners.
I don't,
It's
remember.
definitely a web page on our website.
Yeah. I don't remember. It seems like it wasn't intuitive to me what it was named to find it, but
It's under our roadworks and construction tab at the top of the website, and
okay.
it's under the grants page there.
Road work and construction
Yep,
tab.
that's the tab on the
grants.
top of the website.
Okay,
Yeah, and those are competitive grants would
Right.
include safety, TAP, congestion mitigation, air quality, our bridge program,
Mhm.
economic development funds. So it's a variety of sources that we're typically competing for.
You've
Thank
been
you.
pretty, you've been pretty successful, right?
Yeah.
We have been
In
fortunate.
doing that, yeah.
Any other questions for Matt?
Thank you.
Thanks, Matt.
Thank you.
And Commissioner Fuller, also kudos to the commissioners around 2018 when we said this organization would need to make some significant investments in our IT infrastructure. You trusted us, you had faith and confidence in us to really address that need so that we were able to stand everything up and, negotiate through that pandemic. I feel fairly successfully. So, that's definitely something that I'm appreciative that the board was on board with all the things, all the changes we wanted to make. So yeah, every time in the IT reports, I mentioned the computer refreshes, and now we're on the CMAC refreshes. Now a little more about what Josh is working on, and it's great. We can get new laptops for some of our employees, and again, that just helps us as far as trying to make sure that we have the best technology we can afford. So we definitely appreciate all those CMAC grants. Any other questions? Okay, we'll go to the next slide. Oh, all right. So
Well, we blew.
yes, I guess that was, yeah. So that's all for year end 2022. I believe we have a break built in if everybody wants to take a break, or if we just want to continue on into 2023, certainly at the board's pleasure.
let's just take a quick break and come back as soon as you can, but get up, stretch our legs. You've already stretched yours, so you're
Yeah,
in good shape. So,
Sounds good.
so we'll pause for a bit.
I guess we'll talk about 2023, which again, I can't believe we're talking about 2023, but it is November, so. So we will follow the same format. If there's any questions that you have at any time, certainly let me know. Feel free to stop anytime, and I guess we'll just move on. So next
Okay.
slide, please. We'll just cut to the chase a little bit. And our financial position or our fund balance looks fairly stable. So our deficit spending for 2023 is a little over $4 million. I think we have one of the largest budgets I've seen this agency. I believe our expenditures are about $70 million, which our little road commission, you know, having an expenditure budget of 70 million, that's huge. But as we mentioned, all the road equipment, all the carryovers, so some of this is carryovers, that's like $5 million. I want to say that's one of the largest expenditure line item we had for road equipment. Again, a lot of it is carryovers, maybe some from 2 years ago, but $5 million is quite something. We also have $7 million in expenditures for our new salt barn out at this location here, which I'm just delighted to hopefully be able to see that during my working career at the road commission, because I had my doubts.
Wait a minute. What are you talking about? Was
I
that a little bomb you just dropped?
I mean, you know, 28 years, coming up on 28 years, and
We'll get you a
like, would
special
we-
chair.
yeah, that's right. So it is very exciting, though, that you know, it's a bit of an eyesore, I guess maybe that's an understatement, and definitely structurally has lots of challenges. And we've tried some window dressing, but obviously, you know, it's time. So right there, $5 million in road equipment, $7 million for the salt barn. And is it a barn or a shed? It's a shed. Okay, so I think I referred to it as the salt barn, and some were laughing at me, but I guess so it's a salt shed.
Yeah. It's a sophisticated barn.
Sophisticated barn, right?
Why
So
don't we name it by committee while we're at it?
I do know we also have a very ambitious road program too. So again, $70 million overall expenditure. So we're projecting our fund balance to be about 10.5 million, which is again about 12% of expenditures. So remember, Plant Moran 15 to 25, it's a bit below. Again, conservatively, we hope to come out of 2022 in better shape. Again, we don't know what winter will do in that first quarter. If things are looking a little more challenging than our budget right now, then we can make adjustments. If things are improving, we can make adjustments that way as well. But again, nothing here is a cause for concern on my end, so.
We also are conservatively assuming all equipment will come next year, and knowing that some of this still has to be ordered, the likelihood of that is pretty slim, but we are prepared if we need to.
And the $7 million is assuming the salt shed will all be constructed in 2023. Again, that's pretty ambitious, but conservatively, if there's any possibility of everything happening in 2023, we want to make sure it's in the budget. Yes, ma'am.
Yes, so, and I'm hearing you where you are not, you know, have everything, looking at everything and it looks good.
Mhm.
But, so the fund balance, in 2022, 14.7 million,
Mhm.
and then projected that about 4 million, it's not going, you know, that's going to be used. So how do we, is there a certain amount? I know there was a certain percentage of fund balance that we,
Right, so Plant Moran recommends between 15% and 25,
so this,
and this is about 12%,
right,
which is, you know, on the lower side, of course, but if it was 0%, then, that we probably would not ever present a budget to the board like that. But 12%, in our history, we've budgeted, we've had the lower than 15% in the budget. Inevitably, we've been able to come out of that a little bit. So, and having, 10.5 million, I guess I'm comfortable with that. If, say, we hit all of our targets, and that's what our fund balance would be at the end of 2023. I would be okay with that. Certainly, then we look at 2024 and we'd say, geez, we probably can't do any deficit spending. So what sort of things would have to go or be delayed? But I'm comfortable with, where we are. And I believe staff, I don't want to speak for everyone, but I'm comfortable with the projected fund balance. So
Yeah, and keep in mind, there's a variety of factors that we are looking at, and one of them is, Dan already said, this is one of the largest years of expenditures we've ever had. And part of that is because we've got some large TAP projects. Those are the Transportation Alternative Program, the non-motorized projects. Those are pass through, but they are still showing as expenditures on our books, which means when we have to have a fund balance, a certain percentage of expenditures, we're also taking into account expenditures that really don't impact our operation.
That really isn't our money.
Right, but it's counted, I mean, when you
Right,
do,
right.
because it's math, and that's the way math works, that is taken into account as far as when you're looking at percentage of expenditures. So we're very comfortable that even though this is slightly less than where Plant Moran would like us to be, a fairly significant portion of our expenditures are not even related to our operation. So a $10.5 million fund balance is still a solid, I mean, we'd love to see it a little bit higher than that, but it's still a nice solid fund balance for this organization. Should something go wrong that we have to be prepared, like Grove Road a few years ago, we could cover something like that should it happen.
Thank you.
and we always include things in the project or in the budget, sorry, that there are things that if our fiscal situation worsens, maybe we have to pull it out of the budget. We certainly would not like to, but so again, if things were to go south on us, we feel like there's other things potentially that we could rely on, and again, maybe have to delay to the second quarter or the next year potentially. So it's not like we're going down to our last dollar. Certainly that'd be fiscally irresponsible to do that. So again, I feel, pretty comfortable where we are. Staff does. We had to make a lot of hard choices when we met as a leadership team, as far as, prioritizing what projects we wanted to accomplish. Can things wait? A lot of times we wait again for that first quarter or second quarter review, and some of those are ready to go, and we can add some of those back that we maybe had to take off the budget. So, I feel like we're in a good place, all things considered. So.
Did I see your hand, Gloria?
No.
No? Okay.
Okay, we'll go to the next slide then. Michigan Transportation Funds, Commissioner Green, I know you were asking about the future of that a little bit. So we're expecting that to increase to about 35 million. During the break, I sent all of you an email to the estimates for Michigan Transportation Funds coming from the State Management and Budget Office. And that has, I believe, 22, 23, 24, and 25 maybe, or maybe just goes to 24.
It's usually 3 years.
It's about 3 years. And you can see it's by road commission. So kind of a nice chart there to see what, our peers are receiving. So again, we are expecting things to increase a little bit. And certainly we'll take any dollar increase that we can get. And there is apparently a inflationary increase for the fuel tax. And the new rate is expected to be 28.6 cents a gallon. I believe it's 27.6. Emily, is that right? Okay, it's 27.2 maybe. So they are, and this is just projected. I did reach out to 27.1. So it's going from 27.1 to 28.6. I did reach out to the state of Michigan and the Act 51 folks. I have some contacts there to try and get this number, and it's basically a projection right now. They haven't officially said it's going to be 28.6, but that's the projection that it will be increased to. So next slide. As far as our federal and state aid program, a couple of new things here. So I mentioned the $7 million for the construction of our salt shed. MDOT is actually going to contribute $2 million towards that, which we're very pleased to welcome again any dollars they want to contribute. And I believe that gets audited after what, 5 years? So they'll audit the $2 million. They basically try to determine the salt utilization on the state roads compared to the county roads. And then they work percentages to see how much their contribution will be. So there could be a slight adjustment, but you know, in 2023, they will be sending us $2 million to help you know, to partner as far as getting that salt shed built. So certainly we're looking forward to that. So obviously then doing the math, that means we're on the hook for $5 million. The road commission is, we'll talk about that in a moment, but so that's going to be the MTF dollars of the road commission is $5 million. Also, sorry, Rod, go ahead.
Sure. Just curious, is that a contractual obligation of MDOT?
Yes, I believe it's part of the state trunk line agreement. And then there's also a separate agreement that Adam's been working on with his counterparts at the state. And it right in there, it has all the numbers as far as, you know, contributions and audits and all that. But yeah,
They're not
that's
just being nice, but they're.
no, no, no. Oh, no.
And again, that gets to, it's somewhat of a competitive program.
Mhm.
And they had suspended the what they call the chemical storage program, where they contribute to local agencies like ours. They had suspended that for several years. Unfortunately, our dome did not get any better over that period of time. So we managed to be #1 in the state when they resumed that program. So we have many of our counterparts who are quite jealous. In fact, Adam, after a while, was turning people away at the SAM conference last month saying, yes, I know we're getting $2 million, leave me alone.
Yeah, and you know, Commissioner Green, what's the saying, you know, get it in writing, right? So certainly we make sure we do that for, especially when we're anticipating receiving funds. We want to make sure we get that in writing with all the appropriate signatures and so on, so.
Thank
you. Mhm. And then also another innovation from the engineering departments, we're expecting about $716,000 in federal aid buyout funds. Believe it's the first year of the program. And Matt and his team have been very successful with that. And I believe all that money has been spent, correct? And it's on our primary road. No? it has
Program.
not. Okay.
Program.
Okay.
What did Matt say?
I want the microphone to not hear it.
Yes.
So Matt McDonnell, Director of Engineering. So the buyout program, this is what we applied for this year. We're awarded these projects and it was for fiscal year 2023. So we will receive these funds, and in the budget spreadsheet in the back where it lists primary road projects, you'll see there's 4 projects listed in there where we will accomplish the work next year using these buyout proceeds. So I forget which ones they were offhand, but
We'll get there.
we can certainly get there.
Yeah.
I'll look at the list and I can come back to that if you have questions. Thank you.
So this program is so new, I asked the accounting gurus for the County Road Association, how do I account for this? And they said, we don't know, so.
You said I have an idea.
So, yeah, no, I'm like, I had some ideas and I ran the ideas by them. They said it was fine, so. So yeah, this is something, this will be ongoing, Matt, is that correct? So this will be an ongoing source of revenue for us. Okay, next slide. Township contributions, if you recall, conservatively, we take the township contribution program back to more traditional levels. So it's going to go from, you know, over $6 million in 2022 to more like $3 million in 2023. And then in the second quarter, once we have all the township agreements in place, then we'll make some adjustments. Usually we adjust up. I mean, obviously in 2022, we doubled the township agreement program. Again, because we've been great partners with the townships, and Adam and his team has been very successful in convincing townships to contribute some precious dollars into improving their local roads. But it'll be about a $1.5 million township contributions, and then the road commission share will also be 1.5. Something that's different for this year is we're taking dust control out of the township agreement programs. That's something we partnered with the townships, so they would contribute some and we would. And, you know, there's some debate, is that routine maintenance or not, the dust control that we do? And so we decided to remove that from the program, and that's something that will be on the road commission, the dust control. And do you recall how many apps were we?
Between 2 and 3, depending on the condition of the road.
So this is something that will basically free up the township's dollars to maybe do more projects. So it's something we've talked about for a long time, and we decided to make the change for 2023. Any questions on that? That's kind of a lot, but
So we're absorbing the cost of the dust control
Mhm.
going forward. And the
Correct.
to the
townships
townships.
understand that we're now shouldering that and they don't have to pay for it.
Not yet, they will. That will be part of the local road program that we would bring to this board next month for
Okay,
adoption in 2023.
Yep.
What we were trying to do is reflect that change, which will be a staff recommendation in this budget. So the townships are not yet aware of that, but that certainly would be something that we will share with them should the board make that decision next month to
Got it.
do that. We, for the last few years, have been able to increase our local road matching program quite significantly. Obviously, as we look at some of the challenges for fiscal year 23, we were less inclined to be able to just put more dollars into it. But we felt that this is a change, as Dan indicated, that's been discussed at least at the staff level for a while. And so many of our townships are like, why are we paying for dust control? That seems like that is a routine function of more like a maintenance, routine maintenance type function than it is like a preventative maintenance or a capital type improvement. So we believe that this is an opportunity to, it's a smaller change, but it's one that we can make, that this financially the organization can absorb. And I think it will be appreciated by the townships, and it should result in hopefully any dollars that they would have been spending on dust control can now be put into a more preventative or capital type improvement to the road system. It gives them more matching dollars to spend elsewhere.
What about the drainage match? Is that then rolled in? What?
In 22, we simplified the program
Yeah.
so that we didn't have the road and the drainage, and most of the townships were not understanding, and why is this only eligible here and not there?
Right.
And we simplified the program last year, so they're just receiving $1 amount that can be used for any type of local road improvement.
And did they have the same concern about drainage that they did about dust control in terms of whose responsibility was that?
I have not heard that. I don't know,
Okay.
Adam, have you heard that type of concern?
Please don't misunderstand me. I'm not criticizing this change. I'm just thinking of the slope that we could be sliding down.
I think we can pretty easily distinguish drainage improvements from dust control.
Yeah, Adam Labe, Director of Operations. Yeah, so it's came up before, but when we usually need to do drainage improvements, it's usually project because it needs so much of an improvement. It's beyond just a few hundred feet of maintenance. It's usually an all-encompassing project. So that's why we've always had to get project funds or the matching funds to do that. In dust control as well is just the actual physical liquid. We've already always taken on the machinery, the employee cost. So that hope and goal is to free up the townships in their own eyes, that they want to spend a little bit more, or have some more to spend, I should say, on the local road program and actually do physical work with it. That's kind of our first goal and our idea behind that right now.
Okay.
Yeah.
So where is the funds coming from then to do the dust control?
Well, Dan can speak on that, but that would be MTF from the agency.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Okay.
Question,
Thank
were
you.
you just?
I was just scratching.
I can't tell, someone's scratching their forehead or have their hand up.
So-
Okay,
So this change has already been reflected in the 2023 budget, so it's already in the numbers here. So I just wanted to make that clear that, you know, we made the change and you know, the deficit spending, whatever we're looking at, I mean, all that's already been accounted for in here, so. Okay, and then as I mentioned before, the budget will be adjusted in 2023, in the second quarter. We'll get all of our agreements, signed agreements with our townships, and we'll adjust the numbers accordingly. And again, last year, traditionally it's about $3 million, and last year we were able to double that to about $6 million, which is great.
Is that the amount of the dust control that we're taking over? Is it 3 million or?
It's actually is in the operations.
It ends up being about a $400,000
Okay,
change to
Yeah.
for us.
thank you.
Okay, any other questions on this? Okay, we'll go to the next slide then. So other contributions, again, we mentioned some of the shifts of the border to border projects. Actually, let me talk about the county road millage. We're expecting about $3.4 million. And if that number seems lower than say last year, it is. If you recall, we advanced here in River Drive, which I believe was opened yesterday. Here in River Drive was opened. And so that was initially planned for 2023. And we were able to advance that project. It's close to $1 million. So obviously then we spent the funds in 2022. We would recognize those revenues. So then next year, we'd only recognize about 3.4 million from the county millage, which would be the remaining funds.
And that millage expires.
That,
2024.
so definitely we've been grateful that we've had it. You know, this is the second time now that we've had it, and been grateful and been able to accomplish a lot with those funds for sure.
So it covers construction season 24? The millage
So we
Okay.
need to start exploring
next year?
renewal next year for which ballot, assuming of course we are seeking renewal, which ballot we would want to be on in 2024, because then it would be on the December taxes of 2024 is really what we would be looking for moving forward.
Fund
into
25.
Correct.
We're also expecting about 2.7 million from county parks, and that's for the border to border trail here in River Drive, segments D3 and D4. Next slide. Miscellaneous income. So we are planning installment purchases or financing of 8 of our heavy trucks, and there's a total of how many? So 8 out of 11, at least at this point in time, we're planning on installment purchases for 8 of them, which is about $2 million. So we issued the installment purchases there for 5 years. And again, just where our numbers are falling right now, we just feel we need to finance some of these things. Again, if our situation improves and we have the capacity, maybe we would finance less. You know, maybe it'd only be 4 trucks instead of 8, or you know, just a portion. But obviously we want to make sure that we have a healthy fund balance too. So also the salt shed, whoops, I need to change that. The salt shed, if you recall, it's a $7 million project. We're receiving 2 million from MDOT. So the road commission share would be 5 million. We have all that planned as a large installment purchase, which again, when we get through 2022 and we get through the first quarter, maybe our financial position can change, and maybe we don't have to finance the entire $5 million. But again, we also are looking at what projects that maybe we're not able to accomplish. And again, it's the competing needs and just seeing where everything, you know, what we can justify to maybe reduce or change. So, you know, as of now that we have these, you know, installment purchases, you know, our debt to equity ratio is very good. I don't have the percentage, but a lot of the installment purchases we had for our heavy trucks that we've been doing this for a while now, those have kind of fallen. So, you know, as far as the debt this agency has, it's fairly low. And I believe Plant Moran always speaks to that too. So if ultimately we had to go with the 2 million for the trucks and the 5 million for the salt shed, You know, I guess that doesn't concern me, and obviously, you know, we will be able to meet those financial obligations. Any questions on that at all? Okay, next slide. As far as expenditures, so operations, you know, just need to continue recruiting heavy truck drivers, trying to get all of our vacancies filled. You know, certainly having our union contract ratified, I think has helped this agency. It seems like we've already have hired a few new drivers, and, you know, Human Resources, Nicole and Alicia do a great job. You know, if there are candidates, viable candidates out there, they're finding them. I've been impressed with some of the new hires that I've met recently. So, you know, certainly we remain hopeful. You know, we've been short for quite a while now. But we're hoping that, again, with the contract being ratified and some of the other changes we made for employees, that we can continue to recruit and retain the best and brightest, and hopefully get us up closer to 100% filled as far as positions are concerned. And I've discussed this before. We always put inflationary factors in departmental budgets, especially wages and so on. So we made sure that to incorporate those into the 2023 numbers. Okay, next slide. So we also have some other obligations, to our current employees, obligations to our retirees. We're expecting about 3.8 million for our pension. And if you recall, MERS sends us monthly billings, which obviously we pay. And then we hope to have enough to make an additional payment on top of that. So that's in the $3.8 million. And it's about the additional payments anywhere from $300,000 to $500,000, depending on our financial situation at the end of the year. Our healthcare and OPEB, other post-employment benefits, primarily retiree healthcare, is about $4.9 million. Saw a little bit of an increase as far as our health insurance, which that seems to be the nature, right? But with Brown & Brown, who is our benefits administrator, they've really helped take our healthcare line from being, you know, going straight up like that to flattening it a little bit. You know, unfortunately, with health insurance, it's always going to go up. But if you can flatten the curve a little bit, then that'll at least help out. So, but again, that's about $4.9 million. And I've mentioned this a few times, but the road equipment capital purchases is about $5 million. And a lot of that is from 2022 that we carried over the $3.3 million.
So what's the anticipated potential extra payment for OPEB
That's about $500,000.
as
So,
well?
So if you recall that it's not a funding requirement
Right.
at all. But this agency has you know, made it a priority, which I agree with, to try to address our unfunded level. I want to say we're at about 60% funded for our OPEB, which is great. And I think we are ahead of the curve. So I think we want to continue that momentum. And certainly, and that extra payment is in the budget. So, you know, again, all the priorities and balancing competing needs. But I think it is demonstrating to our employees and retirees, this is important to the agency. We like to get that unfunded level to 0 or 100% funded. And I feel like we've made a lot of strides as far as our OPEB, and, you know, I think we should continue to do so.
And remind me, which of those two do we have our agreement with the state on? Was that the pension obligation?
For the state, as far as being considered unfunded based
Yeah.
on PA 202, that's for our pension.
Yeah.
If you recall, I submitted our waiver and had our plan as far as how to get us to, you know, the level that the state would not consider us underfunded. There's, I believe, staffing issues at the state of Michigan treasurer level, and those are the folks that are evaluating those waivers. Believe me, I check that several times a week to see if we've received notification from them that yes, our waiver was approved. And I've not received anything yet. I want to say in another month or so, last year, I sent a quick email to say, hey, you know, when can we receive this? And they said, we're working on it. And I forgot when we received, I want to say it was the first or second quarter, we actually finally received, yes, your waiver was approved. But I want to be a little careful. I don't want to upset anybody over there, and if they haven't reviewed everything yet, I don't want them to maybe change their opinions, so.
Sure.
We'll just continue to monitor that. I see no reason for them to not accept our waiver. You know, I feel like we're, again, with the fiscal constraints that we have, I feel like we're doing all we can to address our unfunded levels for both our pension and our OPEB.
And we are making slow and steady progress.
Right.
It's just slow.
Well, the market hasn't been helping us for a while.
Yeah,
So
yeah.
what's our funded level on the pension?
I want to say it's about 57%.
Sounds right.
That was as of year end
Yep.
21, I think, 2021. And if you recall, the markets were going great up until that point. So, you know, I guess I'm expecting it could take a little bit of a step back because the markets haven't been great this year, but we'll know that information early summertime. We'll get that, so. Okay, any other questions on this?
Is that with MERS? Who's?
MERS, the pension is with MERS.
Okay.
And then we also, just to remind the board, for our OPEB obligations, we established a trust with MERS, and that's where our assets go to account for the OPEB. And I think that's been a very successful initiative. And, you know, again, hopefully at some point we'll be 100% funded. And I believe at that point, whatever you have in your trust, you can use to pay your retiree health insurance costs until those are gone.
Right. Commissioner McCollum.
Yeah, that extra payment, 500,000, was that healthcare or pension?
So the 500,000 is for our additional OPEB payment. Again, not required, but as an agency, we've decided to try to address our funded level. And the pension, we also make an additional payment that's anywhere from 300,000 to 500,000, depending on, you know, where all of our numbers are what they're looking like towards the end of the year.
So it's two different.
Right.
Yes.
Okay.
Yep.
Thank you.
Commissioner Yamas.
So have you heard any more about the money that was supposed to be available? The state said we could apply for the grant, you know, out of the SIF money. Or, yeah.
Yeah, I've not heard any updates. I don't think has Cram County Road Association, have they provided any updates on it? And I've not seen anything from MERS either. I know it was kind of wait that we are in line if any of that money should be available. But I certainly can reach out to MERS and report back to you if they have any updates, because they're really close to all the legislation that's out there. And I mean, they have liaisons with the folks in Lansing, and they're on top of things. So even if there's no report, I'll at least share that with you. So I'll make sure to follow up with them.
Yeah, when that was first announced, Dan, I know you reached out to MERS. They're very closely attuned to that. And they said, at least based on a preliminary information, that it looked like we would qualify as an underfunded pension and potentially be eligible for the funds. I'm pretty confident that they're paying attention, but we can certainly double check and see if they've heard anything new.
Okay, thanks.
Yeah, unfortunately, some of those things take time, I think, so.
Yeah.
So I'm just kind of curious, of the $500,000, the extra payment, that's for healthcare, and it's another $500,000 for pension?
Yeah, it's about 300,000 to 500,000 for the pension, and then about 500,000 for our other post-employment benefits. Mhm.
Two separate payments.
That's what I thought.
Right.
Thank you.
Yep. Okay. Anything else on this slide at all? Definitely a lot of information there, so. Family, next slide. So again, local road projects, we've talked about this a little bit, the matching program. The road commission is anticipating contributing 1.5 million to that, and township contribution also 1.5, total of 3 million. Second quarter, we will know if that's more robust, and it has been for several years, and we'll make those adjustments accordingly. And of course, again, the big takeaway on that is dust control will no longer be included with this. So, and then we've got about 200,000 for bridges and culverts that we're anticipating next year.
But that has to be matched by a partner, right?
Yes.
And where is the ARPA money that any of the townships have chosen to invest in the roads? Where is that reflected? Is that 22 or 23?
That would be through any township agreement that we have. We don't
Existing?
indicate.
Some of them have done third agreements. and-
Right. If they are using ARPA funds, they're not required to tell us that they're doing that. We just have an agreement with them that we will perform the work and that they're going to pay us. So
Hmm.
if they're open about, I mean, not that they're hiding, but if
Right.
they're electing and sharing that this happens to be ARPA funds, then we might be aware of it. I believe Lodi's looked at it, and maybe Sharon has looked at it. But our agreement is simply with the township and
Got
that
it.
the township will pay us.
Okay.
Next slide.
Hello, next slide.
All
There we
right.
go.
So we talk about this quite often. You know, we have many competing needs at this agency. Of course, every dollar we can justify, we want to put into the roads. That's why we're here. Certainly, there's a lot of pent up needs there too. So, but we also need to balance that with our equipment and facilities. Our salt shed obviously needs a lot of help. Road equipment, again, we want the trucks to stay on the road and not in the shop. And, you know, try to make improvements there whenever possible, and just all of our facilities, especially our older buildings, they need roofs and other things. And obviously, we mentioned IT, some investments are necessary there. Certainly, we always need to continue to make investments in IT as well, because technology changes. You know, computers become obsolete. I'm sure you're all aware of all that. We want to have the best and brightest as far as our workforce is concerned. So, you know, can we provide competitive benefits and wages? You know, what sort of things can we do to not only recruit folks, but then keep them here? So certainly we've been pretty innovative with a lot of things we're trying to do. It's a tight market. But again, I think I've seen you know, a couple of new hires recently, so hopefully maybe that's a good sign for 2023. And of course, our financial obligations, like we talked about, pension, OPEB, we've made promises to retirees, to existing employees. We want to make sure we honor those. We want to make sure we can pay competitive wages. You know, make sure that the workforce feels like we're taking care of them to the best of our abilities. So you have all these challenges, and we meet as a leadership team to say, you know, what can we afford? What do we have to defer? What can we change scopes of, or, you know, whatever the case may be. And I think we do a good job of trying to address, you know, and prioritize all the needs of this agency. So any questions on that? Next slide. Some of the things we're looking at, hopefully we're going to be done fairly soon talking about supply chain challenges, but we don't know. Again, it'll be very interesting to see with all the road equipment we're expecting next year, if we will actually receive all of it in 2023 or not. We are hopeful, but obviously we don't have a lot of control over that. Challenging bidding environment, you know, either bids coming in high, having no bidders or one bidder. So, you know, that's some of the things that definitely could impact the organization. You know, we're expecting certain dollar amounts for a bid, and say it comes in, you know, double or whatever, then obviously then that could change that particular project or those materials, or you know, where is that going to come from if our budget's really tight. Mother Nature is always a factor as well. You know, I feel like we're budgeting against Mother Nature and we're going to lose at some point. So all we can do is use the history that we have and try and budget for close to a worst case scenario when it comes to winter. And then the final 2022 year-end audited numbers. Again, hopefully what we're presenting to you, or what we will present to you in December, will be close to a worst case scenario. And then in the first quarter, hopefully that we are in a better financial position and we can reflect all that with 2023 adjustments. But you know, I think we've been pretty successful as far as, you know, ultimately the budget the board approves at year end, and the actual numbers coming in a little better. I think we have a pretty good track record of that being the case. And so, you know, I see no reason that would change for 2022 year end. So next slide. So what are the next steps? So I always find this interesting, but in order to open our doors on January 1, we need an approved budget by the board. And we also need to have a fund balance, which the federal government, you hear all the deficit spending, and I don't know how many trillions that's at, but I don't want to say we don't have that luxury, because I feel like you should have some sort of fund balance. I feel like that's being fiscally responsible. So I don't necessarily have a problem with the requirements we have as a local agency. But you just wonder why all government isn't treated similarly. But anyway, enough about that. So we would need a public hearing for the 2023 budget, which would be at the December 7th board meeting, which I believe is on a Wednesday. Is that right?
correct.
So that was moved.
Right, everybody noted that, right?
Right.
Pushed it,
Mhm.
okay.
Yep. And so we'll have a public hearing primarily for the 2023 budget. If there are any significant changes, we will communicate that to the board at that time. As I mentioned, I unfortunately was not able to officially close the books through October. So some of the October numbers may change slightly, but that won't have much of an impact on the budget. It's more like, let's say we discover $100,000 somewhere as far as a receivable from a township, we would communicate those type of changes to the board. Or let's say we get another month of Michigan transportation funds and they take a nosedive, well, maybe we need to adjust that. So we would just communicate the significant changes. So if you're looking at the budget you see now, which is more a draft, and the one we present to you in December, some of the numbers may change a little bit, but we'll just communicate the bigger changes, if that makes sense. And then obviously we would ask the board for approval of our budgets at that December 7th meeting, so that we can open our doors on January 1.
Okay.
Okay, any questions on that? Okay, next slide. Are there any other questions either about 2022 or 2023 budgets?
So I have one
Commissioner
question.
Yamas.
Thank you. So I have one question. At one time, we spoke about, could there be a column or a report given to us about to distinguish our actual funds separated from the funds that are carried over from year to year?
Okay.
Because I think public sometimes looks at our bottom line and goes, they have plenty of money,
Okay.
not realizing that we have obligated funds for the trucks
Mhm.
or other obligations that we've made to try, we haven't been able to do. So I know that I've asked that question once before.
Yeah.
And I know that people look at these charts and one more column might make their eyes roll. But I mean, if it's even a separate piece of paper, so people understand
Yeah,
that sometimes they just go to our bottom line and go, well, look at all the money they have.
sure, right,
Yeah.
right. I want to say in some of the appendixes, we tried to make some notes.
Okay.
In particular for some of the capital investments, if they're
Mhm.
carryovers from previous years. Just so, the readers of our budgets can, make some of those determinations. Obviously, some of the projects I've just verbalized more as far as carryovers, but, we can look at that and see, what else we could provide to address your question for sure, so.
Yeah, we have that note on the 2022, and we probably should carry that over to the draft 20 or to the 2023 as well, where on our summary sheet, we do indicate 2.6 is non-spendable assets, prepaid expenses, basically our chip seal and our slag stone and various things, or salt, we're not going to pay you. I mean, those are non-spendable assets. And then in addition, the 2.3 million in heavy truck carryover costs. So we'll try to make sure that that note gets carried forward as well.
Great. Thank you.
And certainly the one slide, as far as our overall fiscal position being 12% of expenditures, if anyone said, oh, you have plenty of money, well, it's fiscally irresponsible to take your fund balance down to zero because, oh, you may have a tornado come through like in
Mhm.
Dexter, or what other emergencies, Grove Road, or so hopefully most folks would understand why you need fund balance, and our auditors certainly, and again, their targets were 15% to 25%.
Right.
And we're showing 12%. So if anything, I think that's a little lean. So that would be some of my arguments if somebody said, well, you've got, $10 million in fund balance. But again, with a $70 million budget too, you just need to, you need to make sure that you have something there, you know, to address anything that may come our way.
Commissioner, is it the nomenclature that we could do a better job with in terms of identifying this money is encumbered, it's obligated, it's not spendable?
Yes.
I know those of you taking budget classes and work with this stuff have your own dictionary that works for you, but I'm thinking, is there a better name to call it
I don't know.
or?
I think that in notation, because I know
Okay.
that that's there, but often
Sure,
Right.
in budgets that I presented, that was always,
okay,
you know,
Yeah.
members would come in and say, how come we can't
Right.
have X, Y, and Z, this extra
Mhm.
expenditure? And then I would have to explain, well, if you look at this,
right.
you know, what our obligations are.
And if you look back to our audit report from 2021,
Right.
that is a part of the auditor's presentation. So they say your fund balance is $10 million and they say this much is not spendable, this much is committed. So basically, if we have construction projects that we carry over from one year to the next, we have to account for the road commission's costs
Right,
in our fund balance.
Right.
And so you can really see everything that's earmarked.
right.
So that is something that takes place at our year-end financial report, and we can make sure Plant Moran emphasizes that a little bit for you, but you
Yeah.
can kind of see that a lot of that's kind of accounted for, really, so.
Do you have specific ideas about what you'd like that page to look like?
Well,
or
really kind of
line
like the
item?
Plant Morant page that's done.
Yeah.
Because that's just really,
It's
clear.
verified.
Yeah, it's
part of the
verified.
audit,
Right.
yeah.
it's part of the audit, but I don't know how many of the public come and look at our audit, probably
Sure.
none.
Right,
You know.
Right.
right.
And maybe that breakdown could be incorporated into our budget reviews that we have. We could just remind the board, you know, what those numbers were. Probably we would just use the audited numbers from the end of the year. But at least that would kind of demonstrate what's earmarked and so
Yeah.
on. So.
Put it in household budget terms,
Yes.
I guess is what I'm after,
Yes,
instead of
yes.
accountant ease.
Yeah,
Right.
yep. Mhm.
And I know those things are the same for you, Dan,
Right, yes.
but not for all of us. And not for everybody who's looking too.
Right, right.
Right?
Okay, what other questions are there? Anything else? Certainly, I've thrown a lot of numbers at you, and I did want to acknowledge staff. I think I said this 4 times today, Matt, but it's a team effort. It really is. And I meet with Matt and the engineering leadership and Adam and all the leadership in operations. And, you know, and of course Cheryl also is with us. And I tend to look at things a little differently than maybe the other departments do. And a lot of times we arrive at the same information, which is great. There are times we don't, and usually we have homework from those meetings. And you know, to investigate why we're not on the same page, and there's maybe some convincing from, you know, the departments to me, or vice versa, or Cheryl, or what have you. But you know, we had some great dialogue on the budgets. Again, had to make some hard choices for 2023. But we want to feel comfortable about what we present to the board, and you know, feel again fiscally responsible and trying to accomplish all the things that we want to accomplish, which is going to be huge next year. So, but I appreciate all the partnerships with the other departments, and just, you know, there's a lot of information there. So if it's just one person looking at all this, things could be overlooked, but I feel like we have a good check and balance system with everybody. I also want to acknowledge Emily for the changes she made to the budget, just making it more readable, more professional looking, and you know, she's going to be sorely missed. Has been great to work with, though. You know, maybe even took me out of my comfort zone with some of this, because I've always done the budget a certain way, but she had the wisdom. She had the wisdom, and you know, just her PR brain is like, hey, let's make this a more viable document. And I don't know if you recall what the previous budgets look like, but they you know, maybe like a high school budgeting class. They may have had documents similar. I mean, there's a lot of great information in there and, the numbers are the most important, but, it just didn't look all that professional. She certainly took all of this and took it to a new level, which I'm very appreciative for. So,
And it's become increasingly user-friendly
Yes.
over
Yeah.
time.
yes,
which
it
is
has.
really
And that's the
helpful.
goal, right? That's the
Yeah.
goal. There should be information in there. You should be able to get to whatever, or whoever the reader is, citizens, whoever takes an interest in our financials, they should be able to get to the information they want to in a fairly straightforward manner. And so, I feel like that definitely what we're doing now, it gets us closer to that.
Agreed. Anything else?
Great report, Dan.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Yes.
Thank
All of
you.
you?
No, thank you, Dan. Well, and the rest of the staff, but particularly Dan. This was a heavy lift, as he said, November 15th. I assured him this was the earliest we would ever be doing a working session. If you look at the calendar, you can't have a third Tuesday of a month that's any earlier than the 15th. So
Yeah.
I know that he was a little uncomfortable with all of that. It was a heavy lift last week. Aaron actually played a vital role of carrying the ball across the finish line. We were literally throwing things at her on Friday and saying, make this look good. So, and as usual, she was up for the challenge. So,
Great.
but I also appreciate all the questions that were asked. I think it
Yes.
helps us understand where the board is coming from and in setting priorities. We try to put everything in. That's usually my philosophy, is put everything in there that we want to do next year. Hopefully, we're taking a scalpel and not a machete to the budget. This year or looking at 23 was a little rougher than it has been in a couple of the years past. So we do have absolutely a list of deferred projects that we hope to be bringing back in the first quarter, but we do also want to feel comfortable in presenting this to the board as well. So thank you very much for all of that.
Sure.
All right. Well,
Thank you, Dan.
Thank you.
All right. Next item are the proposed calendars for next year. And I think we're at everyone's place when we got here.
Yeah.
Adam? And I don't know whether anyone's had a chance to compare personal calendars to this or not, but I know Cheryl has worked very hard to make sure that these make sense, give them to us in advance. So, we can plan things around these dates to the extent possible.
We will try to add as well, not necessarily to the official calendars, but to give an unofficial, sort of some of the bigger events that take place throughout the year that are routine or programmed, things like the CRA Southeast Council, the annual meeting, the highway conference, some of the training that people have enjoyed in the past. We'll try to see if we can get a 23 calendar of those events as well.
Oh, that would be great. And then the second meeting in December is where this group will determine what its officers are going to be for the next. I think we've done it on a 2-year basis
Correct.
in the past. So that'll be at our second meeting in December. Any questions or comments on this at this point? No. And we'll be adopting these calendars, the first meeting in December or the second?
The second meeting in December probably
Okay.
makes the most sense as an
Yeah.
annual meeting for this board.
Okay.
It can be at any point in December, so I think December
Okay.
20th makes the most sense.
Okay, so take a look between now and then to see if anything jumps out at you in terms of, oh my word, that's a national holiday. You can't do that. I'll trust that you didn't put any sleepers in here to see if we really screwed.
We did not play, we are not playing Where's Waldo.
I'm just checking.
Not just to the board, I guess.
No, we are not doing that.
Okay,
I would entertain any suggestions for working session topics as well. What you see before you is pretty much an annual update that we've been doing on various topics.
yeah.
The budget, those ones are a little harder to move around. Some of the others can be moved around based on, what's going on in those particular areas. And certainly if there's topics that are of interest to the board that you'd like to do a deeper dive in this more informal setting, we would entertain ideas, suggestions, try to line up if we want to bring outside speakers in, or if it's something that's, a different member of staff has expertise in, we would like to be prepared and present that information.
And I've already suggested that we schedule a tour of the Emergency Operations Center next door. Since that moved from Hogback over here, that it might be of interest, but to do it when the weather's gonna be good, so we
Yes,
don't
yeah.
have to either huddle up in our down jackets or umbrellas. But I'd really like to see the new
Mhm.
space over there. So think about things like that if you want to get inside a truck and see how it all works, or so it doesn't have to be something that's, we're sitting here with a presentation from staff this way, but it could be, are there other things you'd like to see or do as a road commissioner to deepen your understanding of how this works? Maybe the salt shed, right, will be something we want to see along the way. All right.
All right. Well, those sounds
Anything?
like a great idea. It's like you move stuff around because May seems like the emergency system. I don't know what it's like in May. That would be a great idea to see the emergency
Yep.
system.
It's very impressive. I saw it when it was at Hogback. It was kind of scary. I mean, you felt like you were in a bunker and there could be a nuclear disaster, and this is where everybody would be housed to deal with it.
Yeah.
And they were ready, but it was kind of a wake-up call for me in terms of the preparedness. All right.
If I may,
Yes,
there's just
please.
one other thing that I wanted to bring up, and that is, you, like, for example, this afternoon, we have 2 policies that we are really just refreshing. And that is an effort that I have asked, all of our staff, our leadership team, to start bringing policies, to look at them. If there's ones that need to come back to the board, for example, the 2 that are on the agenda today simply are to mimic what is now in the current TPOAM contract. So they're not significant changes. It's just making sure we've had that parity, which is normally our objective. So you may start to see some of these policies coming before you. That's what that effort is. If it's something that is going to dramatically change, my suggestion to staff is we'll probably bring those as to a working session, and then before it would go on the board agenda. But I just wanted you to know that is an effort that this staff will be undertaking over the next year or so.
Okay. If there's nothing else, I'd entertain a motion to adjourn.
So
Yep.
moved.
Support.
Aaron, if you would please call the roll.
Commissioner Rod Green,
Yes.
Commissioner Gloria Yamas,
Yes.
Commissioner Joya McCollum,
Yes.
Commissioner Barb Fuller.
Yes, we are adjourned until 1 o'clock for our regular meeting. Thank you, everyone.
Thank